Hello, I'm Cindy Ward. December 21st, 1952. 50 years ago, Harry Truman is president. England has a new queen. And though Notre Dame has a 7-2-1 record, Michiana still has reason to celebrate because Michigan State is on its way to becoming college football's national champion. Downtown South Bend is thriving. Gilbert's is one of the top men's stores in the nation. The Studebaker Corporation's best-selling car is the Commander V8. And the Palais Royale is the swinging center of South Bend nightlife. But something else is happening on this icy winter night, something that will change South Bend and all of Michiana forever. On December 21st, 1952, WSBT television goes on the air, and the rest is a wonderful history. It's a history of firsts. On that night, WSBT TV was the first UHF station in the United States to televise a live program. That first live show? A 10-minute newscast read by Justin Meacham and a weather report by a young announcer named Bruce Saunders. WSBT TV was the South Bend Tribune station then, and today both entities are owned by Schurz Communications. President Frank Schurz talks about the 5-year effort to get the station on the air.
TV had been demonstrated actually in the late 30s by Sarnoff and some others, and at the World's Fairs in 39 and 40 in New York, so that we had some idea of this flickering black and white picture. But as crude as that seems today, it was dramatic at the time. And we really thought, gosh, we have a good newspaper and news content. We've got some good radio stations, particularly 960, which our AM was the boomer then. So, we ought to give this a shot. I think we were ready to go on the air much earlier, maybe as much as 5 years earlier. But it wasn't possible. After all of their analysis and technical studies, the government finally decided that they would open up the UHF broadcast ban. Why was it important to be first? And it's like any form of competition. It's like, why do two kids race when they get out of a car? I think it's just built in. And it was important to the people, I think, that had worked long and hard to try to make this happen. They said, well, we can be first, too. And that sort of gave us a little extra motivation. The people that did it were really, really true pioneers, and I think very heroic in every sense of the word.
The race to be first culminated on that 21st night of December. Retired WSBT engineer Carol DeGroff was at the transmitter site on Ironwood Road, and he remembers that an icy rain and a short in a cable almost spelled disaster.
Well, we had been working around the clock to get everything buttoned up inside. We had the transmitter all wired up and tested into a dummy load. It was getting close to midnight. The tower crew was working in a freezing rain, putting up the last few sections of transmission line to the antenna. And we found that there was a short in the line. We didn't dare put the transmitter on because it was shorted. We figured that water had got into the line, so we bought every tank of dry nitrogen, I think within 20 miles. And we fed dry nitrogen into that line for about an hour and a half. It was getting close to midnight. And the short was still there. The telephone company had some people there, and they put one of their test instruments on the line. They said, we have a direct metallic short, X number of feet up the line. So the tower crew went back up there, opened up the line at that point, found the short and fixed it. When the tower crew came down, they walked in the building, they shrugged their shoulders, and the ice flaked off their shoulders. I would consider that above and beyond the call of duty. Those were either brave or foolish men. I think you have to be a little bit crazy to be a tower worker.
With the short fixed, Carol headed downtown to the WSBT studios, at that time on the 3rd floor of the Tribune building.
We got the Tribune building, we got everything put together, put on a live newscast with Justin Meacham. And that was the first live telecast on UHF, I think, ever.
WSBT was on the air, but on the air with what? When we come back, a look at the early days of live TV and the people who made it happen, in front of the camera and behind it.
Guess who's turning 50? WSBT TV.
Congratulations, 22 WSBT TV, on your 50th anniversary.
Though it's hard to imagine today, in 1952, WSBT's daily schedule began at 7 p.m. and ended just 2 hours later at 9. By the summer of '53, afternoon programming kicked in, with shows like Break the Bank and Ladies' Choice. As the broadcast day expanded, so did the opportunity to create live local programming. Dunny Sims came to the station as a director in March of 1953. He remembers it this way.
See, I came here 3 months after they went on the air, and they were just really getting going. What I had hoped was go to a station where I could run camera and be on the radio with hillbilly music. In those days, hillbilly. And I came here and they didn't have a union, so you could direct, you could run camera, you could be on the radio, and it all came together here. Then I did commercials. Sometimes we made it up as we went along, and sometimes we had one commercial we just couldn't get on the air. A free toast 10-second commercial. And I don't know how many times we blew it. And finally, Mr. Welch, the manager, says, all right, the next guy that blows this, I don't know what he threatened us with, but anyway. I think we finally got it right. But
Skip Gassensmith also came to WSBT in 1953. He remembers when weather forecasts didn't have all the bells and whistles and computerized graphics we're used to today.
Everything was live in those days. It was before videotape, before film. And what you saw was what you got. And we had this weatherman, his name was Johnny Alves, and he was quite a character. And in those days, the weather was a map that was kind of tilted so the camera could shoot down at it. And the way they showed the fronts and things like that was Johnny would take modeling clay and roll it up and put it on the map as to where the fronts were and so forth. And of course, this was long before the animation and all the wonderful things they have now. And someone had turned the lights on a little bit earlier than they were supposed to have. And the lights kind of halfway melted the clay. And just as Johnny started his weather forecast, the clay started rolling down the inclined map very slowly. And Johnny, being the great ad libber that he was, said, "Oh my goodness, this front is heading south much faster than we thought it would." And as I said, this was long before animated. So actually, this was probably the first animated weather forecast that they had in those days.
When we come back, a Michiana favorite. No, make that a Hoosier favorite.
"50 years of bringing the news home. Congratulations to 22 WSBT.
In the 50s and early 60s, syndicated shows like Wheel of Fortune and Oprah Winfrey weren't part of the TV landscape yet. Local stations had to produce much of their own programming. At WSBT TV, shows like Homemaker's Time and Popeye Theater were a daily staple of Michiana television. Many of those shows are gone and forgotten, but one has become a piece of local TV history.
'Cause I love you, a bushel and a peck, a bushel and a peck, and a hug around the neck.
Are these folks singing? It might look like it, but Bruce Saunders and Marge Dudak are actually lip-syncing a popular song of the day.
About me,
Yes, about you,
my heart is leaping, having trouble sleeping.
'cause I love you, a bushel and a peck, you bet your purty neck I do. Do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do.
Do you like me, Perry?
Oh, very. Do you like me, Hutton?
Like a glutton.
So where's your Como button?
I love you.
The show was Who's Your Favorite, the brainchild of WSBT TV and radio announcer Joe Kelly. The live show ran for an hour and a half every Saturday afternoon and consisted of 18 or so tunes pantomimed by WSBT talent. Marge Dudak was a 17-year-old secretary at the Tribune when she began performing on the show.
50 years ago. My God, I can't believe it. And I'm still here. There were some other girls on the show with me, and they were real pretty. There was Marlene, and there was Margaret. They were all pretty girls. I always felt I was not that pretty, you know, and I wasn't, you know, so I figured I had to rely on something else. So I would do the mugging and the hem, and, you know, I would do the stuff with Joe, the Betty Hutton stuff, and the screaming and the yelling and making the faces and all that stuff, and I loved doing that.
Hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me?
You can't just mouth the lyrics. You just have to pretend like you're singing and really work with it, and I was pretty good at it.
Hey, 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 what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up? How's about cooking something up? How's about cooking something up with me?
That makes me feel really good. To this day, yeah, people still talk about it.
There you go. Joe and Marge there in tune, Hey Good Looking.
Who's Your Favorite left the air in 1965. And make no mistake about it, it was a favorite among Michiana viewers. At its peak, it attracted almost 50% of the local audience. Survivor, eat your heart out. When we return, some major milestones, including a shiny new building and a channel change.
Do not forsake me, oh my darling, on this our wedding day.
50 years of making a difference. So congratulations, WSBT TV.
By the mid-50s, WSBT TV was the first UHF station in Indiana to transmit in color, the first to telecast a high school basketball tournament, and the first to present a closed-circuit telecast of a college football practice, so an ailing Notre Dame coach, Frank Leahy, could monitor practice from his hospital bed. In 1956, WSBT TV moved to its current site on West Jefferson Boulevard in South Bend. The building, Broadcast Center, was designed by the same firm that created CBS's Television City in Hollywood. It's located on the site of the boyhood home of Tribune publisher Franklin Shores Sr. During Dedication Week in '56, more than 14,000 people toured the facilities and pressed the flesh with WSBT personalities like sportscaster Joe Bolin, football star Tom Harmon, and legendary Hoosier entertainer Hoagie Carmichael. A new building, a big audience. You'd think by now that local advertisers would be clamoring for time on WSBT TV. But remember that in 1956, many viewers still owned VHF TV sets and couldn't watch WSBT. Shores Communications Vice President Jim Freeman was a young WSBT salesman in those days. He remembers he had two jobs when he hit the street, one to sell airtime and another to convince people to buy a UHF converter with a funny name.
First of all, our first job was to sell advertising, and at that time, radio was still the dominant revenue source for the station. Television was another story. Television mostly was national advertisers, and the problem with local was the fact that all sets were made before 52, 57 as far as VHF. So to get the UHF signal, you had to get a box, a converter box. The manufacturer's name was Blunder Tongue. So, I mean, right away, you know, we had something going there. I mean, what the world is Blunder Tongue? So, you know, and obviously when we promoted it, we promoted the Blunder Tongue UHF converter. And so we worked with a distributor, and what we tried to do was develop outlets for people, audience, customers to come and buy those converters so they could see WSBT. And on that basis, we worked with radio, newspaper advertising, and we would have Blunder Tongue converters in supermarkets. We had them in grocery stores, we had them in hardware stores, wherever anybody came, there they could buy this converter, put it in, and then they could watch UHF stations. Now, I hope that some people out there still remember that. Probably not many do, but that name was so distinct, and I have no idea whatever happened to Blunder Tongue after they got done selling these converters.
When we come back, the biggest stories from the past 50 years, and WSBT TV News was there.
From all of us at 60 Minutes, happy 50th to WSBT TV.
From that first newscast until today, WSBT TV has been dedicated to bringing the very latest local news and information into Michiana homes. From the early days of black and white film to videotape and live satellite reports from the field, we've covered everything from blizzards to bowl games to the Uniroyal implosion. In 1963, one of the decade's biggest stories hit the WSBT newsroom. The Studebaker Corporation announced that it would stop car production in South Bend effective almost immediately. The impending loss of thousands of jobs shocked everyone, including Mayor Lloyd Allen.
To have this company make this decision, of course, most regrettable. The building of Studebakers in South Bend has become a tradition, and I know that we're all saddened to have it ended. The extent of the number of jobs that will be affected has not yet been determined. If, as speculation has it, the number will be substantial, this, of course, is going to create an economic problem in this community. This, however, will be a temporary situation, and there isn't the slightest doubt in my mind that we have the ability to solve the problem. It's only a matter of time.
Later, as WSBT cameras rolled, South Bend businessman Paul Gilbert, with Tribune publisher Franklin Schurz at his side, made an impassioned plea for calm and common sense.
Let's not get panicky here. What happened 10, 11 years ago when they lost their defense contracts and they went from 23,000 people to 7,000 people working part-time? This has been the history of Studebaker for the past many years. Am I right or wrong? Now, is it true that we have all-time high bank deposits? I can only talk about our particular business. We have increased our business in the past 10 years. There are other industries that have expanded here. Many of them have. Others will.